There's this little like pad. Aloha world. I don't really know why I'm pressing record, but I just feel like it. Anyways, I'm only starting my day with all this because I'm gonna be filming more. You're gonna see. I'm gonna change locations and just talk a bit about the podcast because season 3 launched. I'm super excited about it, but I think in order to make the YouTube videos more engaging, I want to go deeper. I got so much to say, and sometimes like the final cut, like on the podcast, there's some elements that it's like almost like editor's notes. There's some parts that I cut, and you know, I think they're valuable in terms of content, but it's just not so suitable for the podcast itself for season 3 because I really want to talk about like food, culture, and just enjoying that with the guests. So you know, when it gets a little deep, that's good, but not necessarily what I want to capture on the episodes for the podcast, because I want to make it more like a food show for season 3. So whatever content I did cut out, I think it's still important to feature bits and pieces, or just tell a little, like, you know, behind the scenes of like extra bits about the guest or whatnot. So this is what this video's for. It's just for me to, you know, no filter, just talk about the episode itself. So it's like a recap, editor's notes, whatever you want to call it. I'm just gonna call it notes on a pod, just keep it simple. But yeah, so I'm just gonna be doing that today and capture that for you. So see you later. All right, so just checking in. I'm just currently scouting a location for my mobile studio, so I'll check in again once I find that. Okay, reporting in. Mission failed for now, because I thought, like, I walked all the way to this park and I thought there would be like some picnic table. Nope, no picnic table. And I am looking specifically for a table so, you know, I can do some work. So I will keep walking and I'll let you know if I find one. Okay, you know what? Scratch the whole picnic table thing. I think I'm gonna go into the forest. I don't know what I'm gonna find, and I'll show you what I find. I have something in mind, so if I find it, I will show you. But, wish me luck. Little like path, and then it leads to this thing. It's like my dream as a kid. It's not really a tree house, but it's a little, you know. It's like a little private clubhouse.
Yep, I think I'm just gonna set up here. Okay, I hope this is recording. But yeah, the plan was to basically talk a bit in depth in the podcast episode. So this is season 3, episode 1, and this was with my friend Christina Lafort, and I didn't even mention in the episode how we met. So we met through this, I guess, project called a Testo. You've probably heard of it if you listen on season 2, episode 5, because I also had a friend named Selena who was a guest, and they're just part of the crew. And yeah, it's been pretty blessed. I've been pretty blessed to be able to, like, you know, collaborate with these individuals, but that was just like a crucial thing that I missed on the podcast. So if you're watching this, now you know. But yeah, it was cool that we were able to just go for, I guess, lunch, brunch, and then just talk about it on the podcast. And that's really what I want to do, just to bring in sort of like a casual food show, featuring some like local restaurants and just some amazing people in my life. And what this specific video is for is just, you know, kind of like an unfiltered version of like any comments or any bits that I want to like explain in depth on the episode. This is what it's for. So it's a little bit about like behind the scenes and everything else that I wanted to talk about, because I think the show itself, like the podcast itself, I want it to be more food based for season 3, but I also really love talking and learning about, you know, the guests and my friends. So I think there's like little bits that I think is worth sharing, and this is what this space is for. But yeah, I also want to maybe explain a little, set the scene of some of the places that we visited, and yeah, so maybe it'll be like a mixture of some doodles of me like explaining, setting the scene, and then me just like talking about it, like no filter. So the first location we visited was a restaurant called The Acorn. It's located on Main Street in Vancouver, BC. And it's so cute. It's like on a corner. It's a huge sign with kind of like an acorn doodle, as you know, like, you know, that's the acorn. During our first location, there was one point where we started talking about, well, Christina started talking about how she got into her love for food, and like, you know, it was mainly from her family that, you know, kind of brought her into that space. And then that kind of sparked the conversation with my family. Like, I just realized that there was so much history with food and cooking and having like their own kitchen and whatnot with my family. So there's a snippet that's not in the podcast, but it is. I still have like the recording of it. So if you're curious, I'm gonna just put it here. You can listen to it, but if not, feel free to just skip over this little segment.
Just breaking down the idea of food, and for me, the love of food just really grew from that, as well as my dad had me cooking a lot with him when I was growing up. It was never like full on cooking, but he'd always make me do the prep work, because he was like, you need to learn, because he worked in a kitchen like when he was young, and so he knew that it's good to know how to like cut properly with a knife so you don't cut off your fingers, or like
that was my grandma.
How to actually prep the veggies or anything like that. I would, of course, with going back to chicken, like I would know how to debone a chicken, like one of those rotisserie chickens, so easily, because of just my dad being like, this is what we need to do. And it was always like good memories for me, because now growing up, once I moved out and like started cooking on my own, it felt really natural, versus I have friends who don't cook at all and who find it such a chore and they don't enjoy it, yet I love it. There's something very creative about it, but also I am a chaotic cooker where I'm like, I'm full on Iron Chef, just boom, 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 boom.
Okay, I think me too, in my brain,
when I'm cooking. I'm very chaotic as well, but it's probably from watching so much food shows.
Yes.
We emulate that really chaotic
Yes.
scenario in the kitchen. And I actually love the little not so formal ways of storing things in a kitchen. Like, you know how like chefs that work in a kitchen, they have those like plastic Tupperware, they just have a sketchy sticker on it
Yes.
that labels it, or like, you know, everything's just so raw. I really like to emulate that kind of vibe into my, like, I don't like a sophisticated kitchen, to
I
be
love it.
honest. I want a kitchen to be like used and like actually lived in. And so when you like explain all that, I got really excited because I'm like, that's me too. And like also later on, we're gonna be just cooking together for a testo, and that's how we met. So I'm super excited. Like, this is what I live for.
We'll see the chaos come out.
Honestly, that was really cool that you talked about why you love cooking. Because for me, I only recently found out, like in the recent years, that my family has a long history in the kitchen. Like,
Oh, really?
on my dad's side and my mom's side, they both came from, like, this is why I'm here, is like they both survived, both families, based on food, like starting their own food adventure or whatever. And I didn't know, and so they spent years in the kitchen.
Wow.
And when you said about like the how to cook and like your fingers and everything, my grandma would always tell that to me because like she spent hours in the kitchen as well.
So good.
It's just so crazy because the grandma I live with, she hasn't cooked ever, like from the day I was born. She lived with me, so I didn't know about this part of her. But now that she's, you know, older and she tells me stories, a lot of her stories are like back into the kitchen, and like it's so chaotic, and she like led the whole shebang. And so it's kind of interesting because that is sort of like where I'm headed. Like, my dream is to have my own little, I'm not sure if it's a kitchen or a cafe, but like my own space that's to do with like food and culinary joys and
Bringing
passion.
people together.
Bringing people together. So I don't really have a defined like word for what I'm trying to create here, but a space, an environment where it's just good vibes, good food, good people,
Totally.
and like diversity. I'm not really about putting it in a box. I know that that's important for example, like marketing or understanding like what it is, but it's okay. I'll let it slide for now. And over time, I'm just hoping that I'll understand more about this space that I'm creating and myself. But it's awesome. Like, I really appreciate this moment that we're having.
I think it's cool that with family, there is, I feel like, a sense in the generational families, like even my own family. I had two grandparents pass away, like one right before COVID in January 2020 and then one January 2021. So they kept a lot of, like I say, skeletons in the closet just because, I don't know why they didn't share as much stories, but I feel like now there's a shift in just grandparents and parents sharing more stories with their kids, realizing that these stories, if they don't share them now, they're not going to be able to be relived again and again, and there's so much to it. So I remember you sharing with me when we went for a walk that you're pretty sure your grandma made a meal for the Queen.
She says that, and I still have no proof.
So we need to get more details from her.
And I don't want to bring it up because right now that we're recording this, the Queen just passed like a few weeks
R.I.P.
ago, right? And I don't know if my grandma knows, but there's a really special place in her heart for the Queen. It's almost like her best friend. She always talks about her. They're almost the same age, and she always tells the story of when she came to BC. She was the one who had to like prep or like think of what to serve her, and she was the one who thought of the arrangement of like what dish. And I'm just like,
so cool.
She says it every time. Even my best friend knows. Like, she's told my best friend, and I'm like, I'm not sure if this is factual. I'm not sure.
I hope it is.
I
It
hope
sounds
is too.
so cool.
But
I
like,
love
she
it.
always talks about it. I'm like, how is this possible?
I have stories like that too. My Oma shared a story. Maybe I'll share it later. But like, she's German, so like she grew up. She was like I think 12 or 13 during the whole Nazi era. Which I don't think that's during the Holocaust. That's the proper term. It's a horrible time. But she shared a story like a while back, and I was just shocked because I was. I think early 20s, and she was sharing the story. I'm like, Oma, you've never shared this with me before. So I think it's just this movement happening within grandparents, and I know a lot of families, there's some stories that will never be shared, but I love it so much. Like my husband's grandma, we call her Gran, she wrote a whole book just to keep up the memories. She already in her works of her second book and third book.
Wait, is this all published?
The first one, yeah, it is. Yeah, it's super cool. She's like a little British lady who like has a little garden in her. I'm terrible with England. I'm still learning about it. It's a whole other world.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
I know, right? I don't even know exactly where she lives. Like either, I think it's Congleton or something like that. But yeah, I think it's so. I haven't even read it yet. I want to, but like, it was like a huge part of her life this past year during COVID because she was home alone a lot because like just being very mindful of not getting COVID. So she was very secluded with her and her dog. So she just decided to write down all the stories from when she was a child to like even like getting married and everything. So, and all of her grandkids and all the things. And I am really excited to read it just because I think it's such an insight to her life, and it's almost feeling like she's opening an invitation to be like, hey, like, look at all these cool things that happen. And I think acknowledging those things.
I feel like this is what this space is for. Like, I feel like everyone says they're insignificant in some way, and I'm like, everyone is significant in their own way. And it's the stories that people tell us, that we tell to others, or that we live through.
Yeah.
And then talking about it while just sharing a meal, like, that's the quality time that is so meaningful to me. And I feel like sometimes in this generation, I don't want to put any labels on it, I think we just get too distracted in
social
other things
media,
or something else. But like being in the moment together, it's like harder said than done. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say.
Totally. I think it's something
I wouldn't have known any of this about your family or you.
Yeah.
So I really am grateful that I'm able to like hear this out, because that's what makes up you.
It's
right?
true.
Yeah.
And I think for the note of like you, it's so easy to talk with you. Like the way that you flow and like the conversations that we have, like I feel like it's so natural, I think, with friendships to kind of just be surface level, and it's cool to go deeper because I feel like there's so many different parts about people where, like family, I know is a huge part of both of our lives, both positive and negative, and that's okay because it's kind of
it's what we're built.
Yeah, I don't want to say it shapes us, but it definitely has an effect on us. And so being able to share these things are really important, because even for myself, whenever people share things about their lives or friendships or family, like I find myself really resonating or also appreciating and even acknowledging this side of, wow, okay, that's what a healthy family looks like, or like, oh, this is what a really good friendship looks like. And I think it's all about just learning and growing. So yeah.
If you end up watching this, you're just on this journey with me, and I think I want to share more of like the production process of the podcast. And I think this space, like the YouTube space, is a great way for me to, just document that process. Everything is unscripted here, but I think it's worth sharing, even though I don't really have a game plan. So thanks for tuning in. Once again, I'll catch you in the next one. All right, peace. All right, one last thing I forgot. So if you are interested in the full episode of the podcast, it's actually available on all streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple, Google. And if you are listening to it on Spotify, I would really appreciate if you gave it a rating. It really helps out the podcast. And yeah, I'm just excited for the next episode. So I'll catch you in the next one.